We get to see your room! Yay! I love it. It's very cozy. Very Derek. Derek opened his bedroom door and gestured for you to lead the way. You went in while he followed close behind, shutting the door once more. Your eyes widened as you scanned the small space. Usually you were outside when you hung out with Derek, so this was the first time that you'd been inside his room. Within reach of his neatly made bed was a bookshelf filled with novels. Various scattered soccer balls and footballs stuck out around the books and furniture. Things were arranged and organized with the same care Derek put into most things he did. If there was more time, you were sure there were tons more trinkets and treasures to spot here, like a game of I Spy. It wasn't big, but Derek made the most of his small piece of the world. Are you sure you have enough soccer balls and footballs? Your room is cool.
Really?
Bashful, Derek scratched the sides of his neck. He cheerfully watched you look over his things until it clicked.
Whoa! We've never hung out in my room before, huh?
Nope, it's the first time.
That's kinda weird to think about.
Sorry.
But anyway, sorry I don't have any chairs in here. You can sit on my bed if you want.
You eased his concern with an understanding nod. Derek sighed, letting himself relax. Getting real comfy. I'll sit. After the busy day you had, it was without a doubt nice to relax on something soft. Derek's expression brightened since you took him up on his offer. Derek crossed over to the foot of his bed and sat there on the end of it. His jaw stretched open in a huge yawn that he quickly covered with his hand.
Good job, team.
Whew, we're finally done.
There was no missing the proud satisfaction burning in his green eyes, but you could also consequently see the places where he was wilting. Sometimes you kind of worried about how he threw himself wholeheartedly into things all the time. Don't ask me to watch these kids again. How often do you babysit?
Well...
He shifted his gaze away from you. Derek pinched at the blanket under his fingers while he thought about your question.
Pretty often, I guess. Not all the time.
Oh. Derek stretched his arms high in the air and yawned again. His eyelids drooped as he turned towards you. Gradually, the carefree warmth faded from his demeanor. His face fell into a quiet frown when his hands had returned to his lap.
You don't have to.
Aw, no, that's not what I meant. Derek, no.
You don't have to do it again, Molly. Whether it's a good time or a bad time, it's just a lot of time, and you have your own things to deal with.
Your brows bent at that. Tilting your head, you couldn't help but think about how much of Derek's days went to his brothers. It definitely didn't seem to match how things were with your sister and you. But then, as if summoned by your thoughts about him, the bedroom door creaked open just enough to let a giggling Nicholas slip in. He threw his hands in the air. Well, so much for a sibling-less evening.
I'm dressed!
With a loud thud, the door swung fully open, and Jorge marched in with an extremely annoyed scowl. He put his hands on his hips.
Nicholas, we're playing in the living room, not Derek's room.
Jorge reached for his younger brother, but Nicholas scurried up onto the bed. He warily peeked at Jorge from behind Derek's shoulder. Derek, notably, didn't say a single word, nor did he appear surprised about the intrusion at all. The only movement he made was a light pat on the mess of hair on Nicholas's head like usual. What wasn't usual was the distant look on his face. He'd accepted the reality at hand, but did not welcome it. Mr. and Mrs. Suarez crowded into the room next.
Excuse us.
Sorry, Derek. He slipped away in a flash.
Yeah.
Aw, I feel my heart is just like hurting for this boy.
No more.
Come on, Nicholas. Let Derek and Molly have some peace.
The youngest Suarez stubbornly clung onto Derek's arm. His cheeks puffed out angrily.
Nicholas, go hang out with Mom and Dad. Don't you want to see them, too? They missed you today.
Don't you want to see Mom and Dad too? Come on, Derek.
Nicholas loosened his grip as he shifted to get a better look at his big brother. Derek sighed spiritlessly.
I do, but I have a friend over right now. I'll spend time with Mom and Dad and you later.
Nicholas bent forward and grasped Derek's pant leg. He brought out the big guns and stared up at him with his most pitiful eyes and a matching pout. I'm not surprised this happened. I mean, honestly, if I was there, I would have felt awkward. I wouldn't have known what to say. So Nicholas managed to inadvertently rope everyone into his brother's bedroom and the air became suffocating. He had a terrible feeling that this was a common occurrence for the Suarez family. Nicholas was determined to remain exactly where he planted himself. You kept your lips zipped shut and hoped that you'd continue to go unnoticed until things were resolved.
End of discussion.
Nicholas, we're reading a story. Right now.
Nicholas angrily shook his head as she advanced across the room. She unapologetically peeled her smallest child off of Derek. The young boy let out a high-pitched whine for the entire extraction. I mean, man, these parents are trying hard. I appreciate that they're, like, trying to give their oldest son some space, even though it means that it's going to result in a temper tantrum from the youngest. So, good job, parents. Jorge frowned sympathetically over the confrontation, while Derek winced at the noise. When the deed was done, the middle son followed his mom out of the room. You could still hear Nicholas's piercing cry as he was carried away.
I'm very sorry about the interruption. Continue as you were. None of us were ever here.
He gave the both of you an encouraging smile before carefully shutting the door again. It was finally silent. Derek kept an eye out until he honestly believed that there wouldn't immediately be another sibling disaster. When he deemed it safe, he let out a quick sigh in an attempt to choke back a harsher groan. Derek flopped back against the mattress with another huff and stretched his arms out at his sides. His arms twitched and his fingers curled into fists.
Ugh. There's never any privacy here. How am I still having to deal with things even after spending almost the whole day with them?
You held your tongue, waiting patiently for him to get it all out. Derek muttered grievances under his breath with a harsh glare aimed at the ceiling for a good minute and screwed his mouth shut. I'm sorry, Derek. When he hadn't added anything else, the apology tumbled out of your mouth. There wasn't a single thing that you could do to change anything about his day-to-day, and that made you feel horrible. His head rolled over in your direction, but he didn't say a word. Instead, he surprised you with a weak smile, and you realized that just being there was enough. Evening his breath, Derek folded his arms across his chest and squeezed his eyelids shut. You could tell by the tension in his face that he was still bothered. He was thinking hard, searching for something.
Man.
I can make this work.
His low mumble was followed by a pause that had you intrigued. And then he jumped forward so that he was sitting upright again. The grin you were so used to seeing was back in full force.
Molly, wanna go back to the pool? Nobody's gonna be there this late, and my bros are not gonna be able to leave the house. We don't have to get in or even change clothes. I think it'd just be kind of a nice place to talk and that sort of thing.
Avoiding your gaze, Derek nervously rubbed the back of his head. You could tell that he was trying his hardest to be nonchalant, but he wasn't exactly succeeding. Your mouth pulled into a wide conspiratorial grin. The longer you thought about this plan, the more you liked it.
Alright!
Derek leapt up to his feet and turned, holding a hand out for you to take. Derek squeezed you back and helped pull you to your feet.
Let's go.
Man, I just got hit with a wave of nostalgia. I had something like this happen once when I was a kid. Well, kid. I think I was about 13 as well. I was friends with two brothers. I was closer to the younger brother than the older brother, but we snuck out past his older brother and hung out at the pool outside at night. Oh man, that memory came out of nowhere. That's fun. The door slowly creaked open as Derek peeked out. Double checking that the coast actually was clear, he gave you a thumbs up.
I don't see Nicholas. I think we're good.
You returned his thumbs up, silently hoping that this wasn't the calm before the storm. Derek led you into the living room where you found his dad and Jorge sitting together on the couch.
Hello. Mom has Nicholas in his room, enraptured in another exciting session of story time. Good. Molly and I were gonna go down to the pool area to hang out. Is that okay?
Of course.
He chuckled, knowing exactly what Derek was trying to accomplish. Jorge was perfectly happy where he was with his dad, so he waved goodbye to you both.
Don't keep Molly out too late. I won't. Thanks, Dad.
Derek whispered with complete confidence. You gave your appreciation in an equally hushed tone. Thank you, Mr. Suarez. The last thing either of you wanted was to alert the youngest Suarez that anything fun was happening without his knowledge, so you both silently slipped out of the apartment. Once you were free from the condo's walls, Derek's excitement was palpable. You picked up the pace and raced to the pool gate. For the third time in a single day, you and Derek stepped foot on the condo complex's private pool deck, but you soon realized you hadn't seen everything it had to offer yet. Under the cover of night, the pool was completely aglow with light set into the bottom. The bright blue struck you as inviting breaths of steam drifted off the top of the water, whispering how warm it was. The closed-in space was clear of any other people, and it had been like that for a while, considering the stillness of the pool. Not a single ripple disrupted its aquamarine surface. Here you'd have peace and privacy. Derek was drawn to the water like a moth to a flame. He wordlessly rolled up his jeans and tugged off his sneakers and socks, then dunked his feet right into the pool up to the middle of his calf. He stretched and wiggled his bare toes in the comfortable embrace of the heated pool on a summer night. You joined Derek at the edge. I'll dip my feet in as well, because I'm probably wearing flip-flops. You removed your own shoes and let your feet soak in the pool. It was as pleasant as its sparkling appearance promised. The water had none of the slight chill that the air did. It was the perfect amount of heat. Derek wrapped both his hands around the smooth tile edge and tilted back. One of his legs kicked up as his back drifted down like his upper and lower body were each one side of a seesaw. He grinned playfully at you.
But
So, what were we talking about?
Oh, I don't remember.
oh,
Well, it's not your fault.
He sullenly brought his torso back up until he was hunched over the water. He stared down at it. All his lightheartedness had disappeared in an instant.
That kinda makes the whole interruption thing even more sucky, though.
There wasn't any heart in it, but Derek managed to chuckle.
Sorry for making my problems your problems.
He dug his fingers into the side of his hair, scratching at it in frustration.
it doesn't matter.
I don't even know what my problem is. They came in the room for 5 seconds. I'm so dramatic.
It annoyed me, and I don't even live here. I mean, it's not that particular thing that you're reacting to. It's like everything. I get it, dude. I get it. Derek, that's not dramatic. And it wasn't the only thing that happened today.
Yeah.
Derek crossed his arms tight and pushed them against the top of his legs. The blue water rippled around him as his legs moved against the pool wall. He pressed his heels into it. The pressure that had been only on the inside was coming out.
It's just, the thing is, Nicholas and Jorge need me all the time. And my parents need me because they need me. I don't want to let them down. I really don't. But it's hard. Every day it's like I'm gonna mess up and disappoint somebody.
He bit his tongue and released his limbs from the locked positions they'd been stuck in. He couldn't scrub the furrow away from his brows.
Forget it.
Everyone has stuff to worry about. It's not just me. Mom has to take care of them way more than I do, and Dad works a job pretty much the entire day.
You don't have to brush yourself off.
I don't know.
He went silent, unmoved. Nicholas was the one who caused trouble, but somehow Derek had made himself the bad guy. It was upsetting, but Derek wasn't anywhere close to really being grown up. Of course he couldn't be perfect, even though he acted like he thought he should be. Derek, remember when your dad first came to the pool and you, Jorge, and Nicholas were all so excited? You were just like your brothers. Even if you're in charge sometimes, you're still your parents' kid. You don't have to act like an adult. Especially not with me. Finally, slowly and carefully, Derek dared to glance at you again.
Thanks, Molly, for saying all that.
His shoulders squished inward to frame his lowered head. He looked so much like a hopeful puppy that he could give even Nicholas a run for his money in the adorable face department.
Was it annoying?
It really doesn't bother you that I complain, and sometimes hanging out with me means helping out with 2 other kids?
For all the confidence Derek displayed, when push came to shove, he was pretty insecure about himself and what you thought of him. Like, I could joke and tease him, but I feel like, he had a moment where he let everything down and was just like, ugh, I can't even anymore. So I want to, be serious with him. Derek, I love hanging out with you no matter what. Derek showed his full face to you. It was all lit up by the light shining through the water. The smile on his face was just as glittering.
Well,
I don't ever want to be a pain, but it's really cool to have a friend who doesn't mind listening to me and being there.
He didn't say that lightly. He only wanted to let himself be there for you and everyone else. Being somebody Derek could count on was special. Yeah. His cheeks flushed just admitting it. But with the way your heart fluttered, you were sure your face was a match. Ah, cuties. Then his eyebrows furrowed mischievously, and just like that, he catapulted right off the tile edge into the pool. You gasped as if you were the one who suddenly got plunged underwater. Derek burst through the surface with a loud, gasping laugh.
The water is great!
this is gonna be great.
Everything's gonna be good, Molly. I'm not an adult!
That was true. I'm too easily influenced. Here I go! In an instant, you were hit with an explosion of bubbles as you sunk down into the water. You waited until you felt the pool floor, then kicked off it and popped your head out of the water.
Woo!
Derek pumped both his fists in the air. His black wristbands drooped further down his arms, heavy from being soaked. The 2 of you paddled through the water together. The added weight of your clothes had you both winded pretty quick. That only amused Derek more. Laughter and sloshing water brought the once stagnant pool to life. You and Derek still had the place to yourself and made the absolute most of it. But eventually, Derek crawled up the stairs out of the pool. His baggy clothes poured out mini waterfalls with every step he took on land. Derek looked especially tiny with his drenched jersey draped over his frame. He waited there at the top of the steps for you to catch up, being the dripping gentleman he was. You held the rail, and with each step up the stairs, you felt the weight of your soaked clothes pressing down on you more. You got a thumbs up from Derek when you made it out. Then he carefully tipped his head to the side and tapped his hands against his ears to get the water out.
Well,
Alright, time to face the music.
Having to go home dampened Derek's mood far more than the water on his body. He could do anything here, in the wide open pool with you as his only companion. Going back to his family came with countless expectations and responsibilities. But it still had to be done. Yeah. You gave a small nod, readying yourself for whatever might happen when you arrived at the Suarez condo. Without another word, you collected your shoes and you left the little oasis behind. Oh my goodness. I would love to, but I'd be too nervous. When you made it to the front door, Derek used a key from his pocket to open it. He hadn't forgotten to bring it, despite leaving under rushed and uneasy circumstances. Derek stood there in front of the unlocked door, just staring at it. Practical preparation was his forte. Making himself ready for bumps in relationships was not. It'll be okay. I'm sure it will.
Yeah.
He took in a huge breath through his nose and turned the knob. The living room was quiet when you went inside. Jorge and Mr. Suarez had moved over to the kitchen and were busy putting together a puzzle. Mr. Suarez's shoulder blocked your view, so you couldn't see what the picture was supposed to be. Mrs. Suarez and Nicolas were nowhere in sight. You guessed they were still in the younger boy's bedroom. It was strange not to have someone cheer and shout when Derek walked through the door. There was a feeling of absence.
We're back.
He announced himself with an absolute lack of enthusiasm. He might as well have been calling off bingo numbers to an empty room. Mr. Suarez lifted his head and turned to face the both of you. At the same time, he eagerly pushed his chair away from the counter.
I see.
Thank you for coming home.
The greeting he gave was so normal that it was weird, considering how you and Derek each brought a bucket full of water absorbed into your clothes. Jorge offered a typical family greeting of his own, not taking his eyes off the puzzle. He was either focused or avoiding the awkwardness.
welcome back.
Derek silently poked a bare big toe onto the prickly entryway doormat. The mess Derek's foot was making was too much for the little mat to contain. Water leaked out from the edges. Derek's attempt to face his family was going equally smoothly. The bright pleasantries on Mr. Suarez's face softened into warmth. He followed through on the motion he started and got out of his chair. He crossed the living room to stand with the two of you at the front door.
My hard-working son is always in demand. Our family needs to learn how to share, especially Nicholas.
The last part was said with a little chuckle. Derek didn't smile from the compliment, but he did start to blush.
Excuse me.
A new voice came from the hall. Mrs. Suarez stood there with her hands on her hips. Peeking out from behind the skirt of her dress was a distinct, spiky nest of brown hair.
Now that you're here, someone has something he wants to say to his big brother.
Her words got Jorge to actually turn away from the puzzle and watch the scene. But Nicolas remained hidden. Her encouragement wasn't enough. As always, he was waiting for Derek. You didn't need to tell Derek that, though. He knew it far better than you. He shifted his weight on his feet and gave Nicolas an invitation.
Okay.
What did you want to say?
Nicolas darted out from behind his mom with enough speed to flutter her dress. His tiny feet thundered over the floor until he came to an abrupt stop right in front of his favorite person. He had to lean his head all the way back to look into Derek's eyes. Derek looked down to meet the gaze. Nicolas resisted the urge to hug him and instead clutched at the collar of his own shirt.
I'm sorry.
That's your room. From how much Nicolas struggled to explain his apology, it was obvious he wasn't at a point where he understood why being together at all times wasn't a completely fantastic idea. All that had gotten through was that he'd upset his brother, and that had in turn upset him. Nicholas bit his lip and moved his hands to pull out the bottom of his shirt instead of the top. The best he could come up with next was simply repeating himself.
Sorry.
Derek's lips quirked just a bit as he patiently listened to his little brother.
You should say sorry to her, too. Molly helped you a lot today, too.
Nicholas instantly twisted his head towards you and echoed the word. He was very serious.
Sorry, Molly!
Thank you, Nicholas. Nicholas hopped up on the pads of his feet as a nervous but hopeful energy came over him. Your reaction was the first positive sign he'd gotten. Yeah, I'm like, you know what? It could not have been an easy thing to explain to him that, hey, you've upset a couple of people here. Like, I don't even know what I did wrong. I thought we were all having fun. So, you know, I remember how much it sucked to apologize as a small child. So thank you, I think is in order. The smallest Suarez glanced between you and Derek unsurely. He let his shirt go and balled his hands into fists.
I'm sorry, Derek. I'm sorry, Molly.
Nicholas put everything he had into willing whatever problem he'd caused to be fixed, and into people not feeling bad anymore. The emotional display of regret moved someone in the room to speak.
I'm sorry.
What are you sorry for? Derek snorted a laugh at the unexpectedness of the interjection.
What did you even do? I don't know.
The middle child looked down at the puzzle in front of him again, but he was staring through the pieces as if they weren't there. He murmured just barely loud enough to hear from where you were standing.
You and Molly had to watch me today, too.
Derek's hesitancy completely crumbled, and his usual familial dynamic came back in full force.
Aww.
Jorge, you don't have to apologize for that. I like to have some time by myself or with my friends, but I'd never want to stop having my little bros.
Nicholas's massively wide eyes sparkled. For the first time since they were reunited, he carefully reached out to Derek and gripped his soaking wet jeans. Derek reached down to gently pat his baby brother's head as he did, probably every day. Neither boy cared that this time the hand was damp. Instead, they both smiled at the other with unwavering affection. No matter what fissions happened, it was inevitable that it would end that way because they both loved their family, equally and deeply. Another person took a turn to cut in as Mr. Suarez spoke up with vigor.
Let's race!
Race? Race where? What? Derek chuckled at your confusion and switched his head pat into a full-on hair ruffle. Nicholas giggled excitedly along with his brother.
Dad is asking us to play a video game, an old kart racer he likes.
Ah!
Yes, and I will win it.
Derek's dad cheerfully tacked that on. It couldn't be forgotten, clearly.
Jorge could be player 4.
Mrs. Suarez was the only one who truly kept her distance during the reconciliation between Derek and Nicholas, but now she joined the rest of the family. When she was close enough to you and Derek to whisper, she pressed a hand to the corner of her mouth and winked conspiratorially.
I'll give Nico an unplugged controller.
Derek grinned at that point and shifted into giving the longest strands of Nicholas's hair a friendly tug, but he didn't accept the invite immediately. He included you in the discussion.
What do you think, Molly?
No. What do you think? Oh, I see what you did there, Molly. Good, 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 good. He nodded at you and turned to answer his father.
Alright, let's race.
Derek's mom encouraged you and Derek with her words and Nicholas with her hands, taking him by the shoulders. This time she wouldn't be letting him get away from her.
Go on.
Go get changed. We'll plug it in so it's ready by the time you're back. Molly, you're welcome to use my or Mr. Suarez's pajamas if Derek doesn't have anything you can borrow. It'll be big, but it's better than nothing. Thanks, Mom.
Derek's mood continued to be buoyed by the support of his parents, and he left to go get changed while walking as lightly as he could in his wet clothes. You followed the watery footprints he left behind to dry off too. He did a quick change while you waited with a towel wrapped around you to minimize your clothes dripping. He came out of his room wearing his normal sleeping sweats. Now that he wasn't spilling water wherever he went, he offered to get you something to wear. Derek rattled off what kinds of pajamas his families had on hand. Ultimately... Well, since we're both short, I'll take the sweatsuit. It was expectedly sporty and flexible. Derek was ready to go, even in his sleepwear. While you hadn't been planning ahead about what you'd do after jumping into the pool, it led to wearing some of Derek's clothes. It led to wearing some of Derek's clothes was a very, very acceptable result. Apparently, Molly in game was like, into it. This guy, he was just excited to see her in a swimsuit. Now he's like, she's wearing my pajamas. This is the best day of his life. Derek gave you a quivering thumbs up without making eye contact. It was suddenly like you were sleeping. It was like you were suddenly in Victorian times, and just looking at someone in their sleeping clothes was a grand faux pas. And the funny thing is, I came over for a sleepover already. He bundled up the pile of wet clothes and carried them off to the laundry. He spoke over his shoulder as he walked as fast as he could with dripping clothes in his arms.
I'll get your stuff back to you next time I visit, okay?
Okay. As promised, the Suarez's dark purple GameCube was fully connected with 4 controllers plugged in by the time you and Derek strolled into the living room wearing your new digs. A familiar shout filled the whole room. All was right in the world.
Derek's back!
There it is.
Yep, Nico. I'm here.
Mrs. Suarez was on the carpet with Nicolas in her lap. She had already passed him a controller and he was having a blast pressing the clicky buttons, despite the fact they did nothing except make a little noise. Jorge and Mr. Suarez took seats on the couch. Jorge tucked himself closely against his father, so the two were only taking up one side. The other half of the couch was reserved for you and Derek. I love this family. Derek dove into the spot next to Jorge. He got settled in nicely against the plush back of the couch and folded his legs up across the cushion. You got in the final place and relaxed against the armrest. Ooh, shiny. Jorge passed one controller to Derek, which Derek gave to you, then he handed over a second, which Derek kept. Mr. Suarez filled you in on a decision he and his second son had made.
What do you think?
Junior and I are on a team. You and Molly can play together. What do you think?
Derek tilted his head your way. He lifted his shoulders and added on to his dad's briefing.
It's a double racer. One drives, the other controls items.
Ooh. Sounds cool.
Great. It's me and you, then.
The deal was sealed. Packs had been made. Jorge perked up and shook Mr. Suarez's arm.
Hey, Dad, we're Team Suarez. Yes, we are.
Derek's fingers were on the buttons, and he was leaning over his crossed legs in anticipation for the game to begin. He replied, unbothered.
Cool for you guys.
With his gaze still glued to the TV, a cheeky grin pulled at his lips. Derek spoke one more thing under his breath that was meant just for him, but you were sitting close enough to still catch it. Ooh! Ooh, I love it! Yes, yes, all of it, so cute!
I don't mind being Team Wave Rider.
He giggled sweetly. Being squished into a couch so close to him felt even warmer. All 4 players making up the 2 teams chose their characters, carts, positions, and the track set. To start, Derek and Mr. Suarez were driving. You and Jorge had item launching duty. 3, 2, 1! The carts launched across the starting lines with both drivers getting an extra boost. Team Wave Rider and Team Suarez were off down the colorful jungle road. There would be 3 laps before the race was over. Lap 1 was a frantic race for the top spot. The carts were neck and neck to each other over every hill and around each curve, neither getting ahead or falling behind. Attacks were constantly exchanged and buttons were pressed at rapid speeds. That included Nicolas as he watched the race and tried to use his controller the way everyone else was. You wondered which part of the game he thought he was impacting. By lap 2, Team Wave Rider had taken a strong lead. Almost nothing from the Suarez camp could reach your cart. Once he passed the line to start lap 3, Derek was cocky enough to bring out the smack talk.
I thought you were gonna win, Dad.
Mr. Suarez's expression was perfectly content. More than that, it was serene. And it was with that calm face, Derek's father carefully reached across Jorge, and then in the blink of an eye, locked his large hand around the comparatively tiny controller Derek held.
Hey!
The cart you and Derek shared went out of control, careening off the dirt path into a pit. You had to wait for the game to fish you out and place you back on the road. Team Suarez rolled on right past. That's cheating!
See?
I'm winning now.
Derek's dad was boldly unapologetic. He grinned like a child who just found out you could get a hole-in-one at putt-putt golf if you just dropped the ball in the hole.
You're cheating now!
Derek sputtered with laughter made of equal parts amusement and disbelief. He yanked his arms towards his chest to fight for freedom, but Mr. Suarez's grip was unmovable.
We're running interference, huh?
From a distance, Mrs. Suarez mused over the situation that had begun to unfold. Her husband stole a look at where she'd been sitting. She was gone, leaving only Nicolas on the floor. Mr. Suarez lifted one thick eyebrow and pressed the other lower. He could only puzzle over what it might mean, until it all became clear by the world going dark for only him. Derek's mom had crawled over behind the couch, popped up from behind, and slipped her fingers under Mr. Suarez's glasses. He was caught completely off guard. Yeah, Mom, go! His father started from the shock of a surprise attack that wasn't committed by himself.
Yeah, Mom!
Derek hadn't gotten his controller back. Mr. Suarez was stubborn in his hold, but his dad was just as incapacitated as a driver.
Yeah, Mom!
An echo of Derek's cheer came from behind. All the excitement in the air had stirred a fire in Nicolas. He wasn't just playing with an off controller anymore. He crawled on all fours at a rapid pace until he reached the couch and launched himself right at his dad's stomach. It was powerful enough that Mr. Suarez sprung forward and Mrs. Suarez's hands were yanked off him. But Derek's controller was finally freed. Mr. Suarez had to let go of both controllers to catch his squirming child. Nicolas would not be contained. He climbed up over his dad's shoulders and wrapped his arms around Mr. Suarez's face. In sweet justice, the Team Suarez cart flew off a bridge into the abyss below.
Yeah, Nicolas!
Jorge placed his own controller in his lap with a shake of his head and a smirk. Team Suarez wasn't winning this race. Derek rolled his shoulders and poked a tongue out of the corner of his mouth in concentration. He was back in business. The Team Wave Rider cart course-corrected and raced towards the finish line at the final lap. The youngest Suarez hugged all four of his limbs around his dad, even tighter from the thrill of seeing Derek speed his car around the track.
Yeah!
Items weren't needed now, but you were just as invested in watching your cart make the last stretch. And Derek brought it home, crossing the finish line.
We won!
Derek threw his fists into the air, pumped them back down to his chest, and turned to you with a palm held out for you to smack. Yeah. The clear sound of your high five was a proper victory note.
We won!
Nicolas sent his arms up towards the sky, a perfect imitation of his eldest brother. Mr. Suarez used the opportunity to collect his son from off his shoulders and placed Nicolas into his lap. He pet his son's hair and he laughed, breathless but full of joy.
Okay.
I lost. Next race. Next race.
This time Derek repeated the phrase, still raring to go. But that was naturally followed by the original copycat. Nicolas clapped gleefully and snuggled up against his seat on his father's chest.
Next race!
Jorge picked up his abandoned controller once more. His voice was quieter but no less sincere.
Yeah.
Next race.
In all the commotion, you'd completely forgotten you could have switched to the driver role to take over for Derek at any time. Jorge could have too for his dad, but you were glad it went the way it did. Team Wave Rider got its win with the assistance of Team Pile drivers Nicolas and Mrs. Suarez. And the game was just getting started. Race next. Next race. You couldn't help joining the pattern. It got big smiles from the family.
Well,
Now this is a real party. There's still pizza in the fridge. Who wants leftovers? The suggestion of food riled Nicolas up even more. He clambered over his dad's shoulders for the second time, tugging on his beard and accidentally knocking his glasses off. Mr. Suarez wheezed out a chuckle. Nicolas stared out from over the couch into the kitchen. He wanted that pizza, but couldn't be the first to ask. I do!
I do!
Same.
Me too.
Jorge and Mr. Suarez chimed in their own requests.
Sure.
Can I have some, Mom? I would like some pizza. My beloved wife who never turns against me.
Those two are so cute. She snickered with a glint in her eyes.
Of course. Start the game. I'll heat it up.
All four of the Suarez men spoke in unison.
Thanks, Mom!
Thank you too.
you're welcome.
The players all resumed their positions and took up their tools, slightly sweaty GameCube controllers. When the second race started, the grin on Derek's face was one of the most radiant you'd seen the whole day. His dad, mom, and brothers too really knew how to make Derek happy. That brought a smile to your face too. From getting a window into Derek's life, and from what you knew from your own, spending every day with the same people could take a lot of patience. But there were a lot of perks too. Your time at the Suarez household ended with family, food, and fun. There wasn't much more you could have asked for. Aww, that was so cute and wholesome, and aw, man. Getting to see some of Derek's frustrations come out, so relatable. But it was just such a cute moment. It had so many freaking cute moments in it. Oh, I loved it. This Derek route is great. I'm really enjoying it. Alright, next time we're taking that boy on a date. See you then.